I was 18 years old when I was taken in the U.S. Army. I was a draftee from Fort McPherson in Atlanta, Georgia. My Army serial number is 0527376. I was taken in and I went to the infantry school at Fort Benning, and I graduated from there, and that's how I became an officer. I was young. I was 18 years old when I went in, and I became 18. I was 18 years old. I was an officer, and some people claim that it's not true, but nevertheless, that's exactly what happened. And I was an officer's. I was an OCC class 199, and I became an infantry officer.
Well, what happened after you went through your basic training? Where did you go?
Well, I went to the grenade range at Fort McClellan, Alabama, for 2 or 3 weeks of further training in hand grenades and so forth. But basically, I was just practicing throwing hand grenades.
Now, did you mention to me earlier though that you also did some training as in parachuting?
Oh, I did that later on.
Oh, okay.
I did that a year went by, and I was in the Airborne Training Center in Rome, Italy, at Ciampino Airfield, which was one of the main airfields in World War II, in Rome. But that came later.
Okay. Well, where did you go then, sir, after you finished your training here in the States?
I went to I got put in the 83rd Division, 329th Infantry, a Baker Company. And that's where I was for the next 6 to 8 months, 9 months. Yeah.
Was that in the States, or did they?
Yes, that was in the United States. And I eventually got sent as a replacement now, to Italy.
Where in Italy?
We were in Naples.
Naples?
But we moved up to the Volturno River, and we lived in tents along the river at Count Chiano's farm. Chiano, he was one of Mussolini's main guys, and he was one of Hitler's main guys.
Now, did you tell me, did you experience any combat while you were there?
While I was there, yeah, I was sent to combat in the 30th. I was in the 30th Infantry, 30th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Division, and the 5th Army.
Now, is this anywhere near the Anzio? Because I think you mentioned that you were at Anzio.
This was right in the coast of Anzio. As a matter of fact, we launched our attack on the final attack on Rome from Anzio.
Okay, and how long were you in the Anzio area? Because that lasted several months, if I remember correctly.
I was in the Anzio area for a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks. It was bad enough.
Yeah. Can you describe what it was like in the combat there?
Well, I can't expressively say what it is, but our regiment, the 30th Infantry, was stationed in Anzio, and we jumped off on the 4th of June. Now, Rome fell the 6th of June, but the 4th of June very easily became the 6th of June. And I was there.
Can you tell us what it was like when you entered Rome? I mean,
it was unbelievable.
How so?
It was the population had been up since they were up all night. The population of the city of Rome, and they were waiting for us to come in because the Germans had vacated, and they couldn't believe the American army was entering Rome from the south, because nobody had ever entered Rome from the south. But we went right down the Appian Way and to the surrounding areas of Rome. As a matter of fact, our first objective was the University of Rome. And our second objective was the Palace of Justice on the next to the Tiber River, right next to the Vatican.
And what was the attitude of the Roman people as you were?
They were very, very happy to get rid of the Germans. I mean, I never seen such festivities as getting rid of the Germans. The Germans originally came in as their occupier, but then they became their conqueror. How was it? I had an interview once with, as an officer, I had an interview with Umberto, who was the son of the King of Italy.
Can you describe how you met him?
Oh yeah, we rented a sailboat, and we sailed in the bay. I could sail. You know, those days. I learned how to sail from in my backyard, and I told the guys I could sail, and myself and three other officers. I don't remember whether there was two other officers or three other officers. I don't remember all that, but nevertheless, we sailed south along the Bay of Naples, and it's probably the way the wind carried us. And we came upon this beach, and there was a guy in the middle of the beach, under all kinds of auspices, the umbrellas and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And the moment we got to the beach, you would have thought that the hell was breaking loose, because all the police, the Italian police, came down, swarming down there. And he said in perfect English, better English than I speak, Umberto, I'm talking about Umberto now, in perfect English, he told the Italians to back off. And we identified ourselves as three American, or three or four or five or whatever it was, American Army officers. And then Umberto proceeded to tell us what it was with the Germans, with the Germans. And he described his the stay with the Italian people and the Germans as, this is the way he described it now. I have different opinions of this. I frankly think that he was exaggerating. He said the Germans were invited in to occupy some this and that and the other thing, and they became our conquerors. And so I had seen the Germans had a 10-for-1 policy. For every German killed in the rear areas, they took 10 Italian hostages. So some Italian had thrown a hand grenade into a truck of Germans and killed 10 or 15 of them. And I want to tell you one thing. My attitude towards the Germans is that I didn't care how many I saw dead, but as long as they were alive. But every American bothered me that was dead. If a GI was dead, it bothered me. If a German was dead, it did not bother me. And I want that clearly understood. Anyways, the mainstay of our occupation was in front of us, and I was going to play a part in that.
Okay. Now, you had mentioned when we first met that of the 10 Germans that were killed with the hand grenade in the truck, the Germans had killed 30 for each person. They had killed 30 Italians?
No, 10.
10 Italians. Oh, I'm sorry.
They had a 10-for-1 policy.
Okay.
On this issue.
And you mentioned something about a cave, though. How does that fit in?
Well, the cave was south of Rome, and I up to that point I had not seen the cave. You know what I mean? I just didn't I didn't care. It didn't bother me. You know, it just it didn't make any difference to me. But when the Germans went ahead and took 150. They killed 250, 300 people in that cave. But so they half were Italian and half were Jewish. And then 30, 40 years later, I saw the cave, and I said that I entered Italy right near this cave, you know, and I did, because it's not far from the Appian Way. And it's not the way Umberto and myself discussed the German occupation of Italy. I mean, he had to give excuses for it. But the Italians had executed Mussolini and Mussolini's girlfriend. And in the plaza, in the piazza, at the plaza, in
I think it was Milan, wasn't it?
Milan, yeah. And I was aware of that, but that occurred afterwards. That included afterwards.
What were your duties in Rome?
My duties in Rome were I was in B Company of the 30th Infantry Regiment, and my duties in Rome were just to remain hidden, sort of. You know. Incidentally, when I talk to people about my duties in Rome, the guys in our company took off in this German touring car with only high-ranking Germans were this touring car was available, and they said, "Jake, you're responsible for all security in the company area." So I went ahead and I took I had my headquarters in a barber shop because I thought that was a good place to go. And anyways, I had my headquarters in the barber shop, and I proceeded to, you know, do what I was supposed to do, and my duties were to clear the fields of fire in case the Italians staged a counterattack. And that's exactly what I did. I made sure that the fields of fire were clear, and I made sure that the access to the Vatican was. I put machine guns on that area, and
So you were in charge of security of the Vatican area itself?
yeah, the basilica.
Really? Okay.
The outside of the Vatican.
Did you have to mount any machine guns on the St. Peter's Basilica?
I don't remember exactly, we relied mostly on the BAR, the Browning Automatic Rifle, and but it could be used as a machine gun. I mean, the magazine held 16 bullets, and it could be used as a basis of the weapons. And incidentally, the BAR was the standard weapon of the United States infantry. It's called the Browning Automatic Rifle.
Not familiar with it. So how long were you in Italy?
I was in Italy for the better part of 6 months. These are rough estimates, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Because we left Italy. I went through the Airborne Training Center, and then we left Italy, and I got my wings as a parachutist. I made my 6 jumps, and I passed my physical conditioning courses because there's a lot of physical conditioning leading up to that part, you know.
Sure.
And then I got on an airplane, and we flew over to
You ended up going to France, didn't you?
yeah, France.
Okay. All right. And then from a conversation that we had previously, I believe you told me that you ultimately got involved in the Battle of the Bulge.
Yes, I did.
Can you describe what that was like? And
Yeah,
where you were?
I'm going to describe that right now. I was in the 517 Parachute Infantry Regiment, and we had 3 battalions, 550 men, maybe 600 men in a battalion. You know, maybe 50 or so more. I don't know. I'm not sure. But I'm not sure the table of organization then. But nevertheless, you got to keep in mind that I went through the hospital system. I went through the hospital system, and I went through it extensively. In other words, I was evacuated to evacuation hospital, where the first thing I remember is the church, the school. They took all of our wounded guys and put them in a school. I'm not talking about it, you know. Like lay the lieutenant here, put the lieutenant here. That type of thing. Don't forget, we were all frozen, and our feet were frozen, and our hands were frozen, and we couldn't manipulate anymore.
Now, these injuries came about as a result of your experience in the Battle of the Bulge.
No, in the Battle of the Bulge, they amplified that thing. In other words, we had a sharp action with the Germans over a barn, and I think I got scabies in that barn myself. But we had to get out of the cold weather, so we drove the Germans out of this barn, and we took the barn, and we used it for our guys.
How cold was it there?
It was the worst. It was the worst. There was about a foot of snow on the ground to begin with, and a lot more than there is here. And the coldest of the created both of the armies could have been evacuated between you and I. But I was a member of the American Army, and we were out to, we drove the Germans back to their original lines when they eventually started their attack.
Right.
But it was unbelievably cold. Unbelievable. It was the worst winter they've had in Europe in 100 years. Because even Frederick the Great didn't have winter campaigns.
Oh.
So when Hitler entered on a winter campaign, that's the Battle of the Bulge. And the Bulge was made up of basically the fighting at Malmedy and the fighting at Bastogne. Those were the two principal points. You know, I mean, don't misunderstand me. That means there wasn't any fighting anyplace else. There was plenty of fighting around St. Vith, Vith, and in all those villages around there.
And where were you primarily during that battle?
I was on the Somme River, which was frozen over, living out in the cold. Can you picture, living out today in a tent? If you had that, you were lucky. And the holes that were dug in the ground were holes that the German army had dug. And I used to worry about that incessantly.
How's that?
Because I worried about artillery coming in on us. I was concerned about it.
Okay.
But there was no way to dig a hole in those days. So you had to use their holes that they had dug. You understand me?
Sure.
There was no way to dig a hole in the ground was totally frozen. Totally. I said it was the coldest winter they've had in Europe in, I don't know, 50 or 60 or 70 years, or some people said the coldest they ever had in Europe and in all the history of Europe.
Wow. Now, from what I recall of the statistics there, the Allies lost about 80,000 casualties.
That's right.
Of which 20,000 were due to the cold.
That's probably correct.
And it sounds
I'm surprised it's not more. But the Germans also suffered a lot.
Oh, yes.
I mean, they suffered a tremendous amount. I mean, we punished them brutally through the air and on the ground with our artillery and that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? But we punished them. We punished them. Believe me, far in excess of 80,000.
Would you say that your experience in the Battle of the Bulge was the worst experience that you had?
Oh yeah, definitely. Everything from there was downhill. I mean, even though the Battle of the Bulge was by far the worst. It was much worse than the attack on Rome. The attack on Rome was done in mild weather. Rome was pretty far to the south. People used to go there to settle. They get the boot of Italy below Rome. If you look at the map.
I'm going to take you back to your experience. You said you were taken to a hospital.
I was finally taken to an evacuation hospital.
Well, prior to that, though, let me go back to where you said you
prior
were taken.
To that was the
schoolhouse.
Was the schoolhouse.
Yeah. And what was that experience like in the schoolhouse? Was it just a...
Well, the schoolhouse was I laid on the floor, and they said, "Here, put the lieutenant over here." And I just remember that, put the lieutenant there and put the lieutenant there. You know what I mean? I remember that. But then they took me to an evacuation hospital, which was a protocol. In order to get further on back. I mean, the idea was to get out of the fighting. And I remember the evacuation hospital because it was a tent, nothing but a tent, with the sides of it lifted up in the middle of the winter. And I remember the flap of the canvas, you know, on my face. So I was half in and half out of the hospital.
It must have been pretty cold.
It was very, very cold. It was snowing outside. There was a foot of snow on the ground because one of the high-ranking officers asked me where my battalion commander was, and I said I don't know where he is, you know. But it was awfully cold out there.
Well, speaking of commanders, there were the two primary commanders in that area. In the north was Bernard Montgomery for the British, who commanded some American troops. Then you had Omar Bradley, I think, who was the overall commander.
Yeah, he was the overall commander.
Was he your commander then?
Yes.
He was, okay.
Yes. But he wasn't our battalion commander.
No, no. So when you were in Italy and in Belgium, the Battle of the Bulge, did you get much mail from family back
I
home?
got a lot of mail. All of us, I got sacks of it, and with cookies and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Of course, they were all spoiled, but nevertheless, my mother was alert, and she kept the cookies kept coming
How frequently did she write to you?
every day.
Every day. Wow. Wow. Do you still have any of those letters?
No, I don't have them.
That's a shame.
But they all said essentially the same thing. I hope you're doing well and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Well, that must have done a lot to bolster your spirits.
Well, it did. It did.
Yeah,
It did.
that's nice. Did you win any medals, get any medals as a result of your service?
I don't think so. I don't
Because
think
I thought someone had mentioned that you had 4 bronze stars.
I don't know whether I did or didn't.
Oh, okay.
The Bronze Star was a common medal in the infantry, but I didn't. I don't know.
After you left the evacuation hospital, is my memory correct that you went back to Paris?
Oh no, I went back to Liege.
Liege. Oh,
Liege in Belgium, and then I went to Paris.
okay.
I ended up in the First General Hospital in Paris.
How long were you there?
I was there for a couple of weeks, but I was glad to get out of the fighting. Glad, very, very, very happy to get out of the fighting.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and then they told me they were going to send me back to my outfit. I rebelled at that, and I told them, "No, you're not." I said, "I've had enough already." I said, "I've seen enough, and I've done enough." I said, "Enough is enough." I said, "One war in a lifetime is enough for the average person."
Now, while you were in Europe, I believe you mentioned that you had the opportunity to go to Switzerland for some R&R.
Yeah, I did. I went to Switzerland I was going for 2 or 3 weeks.
What was that like over there?
It was like getting into it was like going from a beat up building to a building that wasn't beat up. Switzerland was absolutely modern. The Swiss people were great to us. They couldn't get enough of us. They loved us.
What kinds of things did you do there?
Oh, I did a lot of things there. I drank a lot of hot chocolate, and I ate them out of chocolate completely. I took the tour around Geneva, Lake Geneva. So I spent a night or two in Neuchâtel, and I spent here and there. But the accommodations in the hotels in Switzerland was terrific. I spent maybe a night or two in the capital, Bern.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget, 65% of the people in Switzerland are Germans. You know,
So
and
did you not?
the Swiss were very, very busy building materials for the Germans.
So why do you think that the reception of the American soldiers was so favorable?
Well, just because we were Americans, we were the new guys on the block.
Okay. Now, when I first met you, you had you mentioned a couple of other things I think are important to bring up during our conversation. One of them was I think you were in charge of some German prisoners of war for a while.
Oh yeah, I was in charge of putting them in railroad cars. It was my main job, and they were out of the fighting, of course, which they were very happy with. Whether Hitler won or got beat, it didn't make any difference to them. They were out of it, and they were exemplified in this attitude here, because they were happy to be prisoners, not laying on some slab in some evac hospital. Don't forget, these hospitals were all tents.
Sure.
In those days.
And did they not, the prisoners, did they not give you some sort of a gift?
Yeah, they took their they gave me a gift, but most of all was I came across a master sergeant by the name of Meyer.
A German.
German, yeah. Oh yeah. And he saluted me, and I saluted him back, of course. But he was from the old German army. He was a career soldier. And he said, Master Sergeant Meyer, surrendering for the German Wehrmacht. He used the word Wehrmacht. And I always thought these guys had swastikas all over, And every German soldier had a swastika on his breast, either his left or right breast. I don't remember.
A tattoo?
No, it was sewed into his uniform. Sewed into his uniform.
Yes.
I don't know, the origin of see. But when I was evacuated, they pursued a different course.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious though. You had indicated that they gave you a gift.
They did give me a gift.
What was that gift?
I'm just trying to think of it. It was a gift of
like a suitcase or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a map case.
And why did they give that to you?
I don't know. I don't know why.
Huh. Was it Sergeant Meyer that gave it to you?
He must have had something to do with it.
Okay.
But he's trying to win me over. I mean, I didn't have to be won over. I mean, I was perfectly happy with those guys. I mean, I was happy to get out of the battle.
Yeah.
I mean, the end of the war was it was a question of time, and I knew that, and they knew it, and everybody else knew it, and it was a question of time. That's all it was. If it didn't happen 1 month, it would happen the next month. But the battle was basically over with.
And when I first met you, you had alluded to some experience you had dental treatment in the field.
And what?
Dental treatment?
Oh yeah.
What was that about?
I was with the 30th Infantry, and they took us into this open field, and everybody lined up according to rank. Of course, I was right up there. And I hadn't seen a dentist in years and years and years. And I don't even remember the last time I saw a dentist. But here they were cranking up all this stuff, you know. There were 2 GIs on every drill press, you know, drilling, and I just couldn't get over it.
So it's like a mass assembly line of
Yeah.
of dental technicians and
Yes,
dentists.
yes, exactly what it was.
And when we first started this conversation, there was one part that we kind of skipped over, and that was your experience prior to being joining the military. You had some military experience as a civilian, did you not? In school?
Oh yes, I had 4 years of ROTC to begin with.
And where was that?
And that was at Georgia Military Academy in College Park, Georgia. My folks sent me away to private school, and so and they paved the way for me to become an officer in the infantry. So at the age of 18, I became a lieutenant, and it was only after the Battle of the Bulge that they promoted me to first lieutenant.
Okay. Do you think that your experience at the Georgia Military Academy prepared you to be a better officer in the United States Army?
I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, I'm gonna have to deny that.
Okay. After you got discharged from the Army,
Yeah,
and you came back into civilian life,
that's
did
right.
you have any problems readjusting to civilian life?
No, I immediately registered at Ohio State University, and I went under the GI Bill of Rights. That's the reason I went back to the States to begin with, because I heard about this business that was going on here, and I just accepted the fact that I was accepted at Ohio State University, and that I was going to go for my degree. And I knew my requirements, and I knew my shortcomings, and I didn't think I could survive the engineering school, and so I changed my curriculum accordingly.
Okay. So you didn't suffer any as a result of your experience from like PTSD or anything like that? Or
No, I don't think so.
No. Okay.
But I don't forget, some of the classes at Ohio State University had 200, 300, and 400 kids to them, you know, at that period of time.
Okay.
So I wanted to make sure that I took courses under the most prolific of the professors there, and I did.
Have you ever returned to Italy or to Germany or Belgium, to the
Oh
areas that you
yes,
fought?
yes.
What was
My
that
wife
like?
can tell you about that.
Okay. Well, how about if we talk about it a little bit now that we have you in front of the camera? I mean, did it conjure up any extreme emotions within you, or was it just...
No, the only thing I remember is that we went down and we saw this cemetery, and I had visited that cemetery 8 or 9 months prior to that, and I witnessed a burial there. But
Where was the cemetery, in Belgium?
the cemetery was in France,
In France.
Saint Mary Glisse.
Oh.
It's a famous cemetery because because of not only the Battle of the Bulge, but the invasion of Europe hinged around this cemetery, Saint Mary Glisse.
Saint Mary Glisse, yes.
Yeah.
And what is your attitude today towards the German people in general? Do you have
I don't particularly trust them.
Okay. There are a lot of younger people. I mean, people born in the 60s and later, maybe, that just really don't have a full appreciation for the significance of World War II and the sacrifice that you and millions of other soldiers made. Do you have any thoughts about that? Any comments you'd like to make? Should younger generations be viewing this video at some point?
I think they should definitely get the rise of Mussolini and all of his henchmen, Count Chiano and all the rest of them, and I think they ought to get that, to take that as a pre-runner of fascism, and they can take that to the bank, and I think they should learn from their lessons.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, we neglected to mention that he was transferred to Le Havre to be port intelligence after the Battle of the Bulge.
You were transferred to Le Havre?
Yeah, I was assistant port intelligence officer of Le Havre.
And what did that involve? What was...
Well, it's mainly these ships had to have to be properly guarded, and there were ships constantly going. Don't forget, Le Havre was a bait exodus for the ships, and so in the crews of the ships, and I became acquainted with a merchant marine through that.
And so you were
I realized how lucky they were in getting out of the fighting, out of the war.
And Le Havre, that's a port in France?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's where the Seine River flows into the ocean, English Channel. This is Le Havre.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate the opportunity to meet with you and hear about your experiences. And I consider it an honor, and I certainly thank you for the service and sacrifice that you made during World War II.
All right. Thank you very, very much.